The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We are pleased to welcome first-time guest, Pennsylvania Representative Joanna McClinton, currently the minority leader of the Democrats in Pennsylvania's House of Representatives. That is just the current state of affairs, because in a few weeks, when the General Assembly reconvenes, Joanna will be elected the first ever woman Speaker of Pennsylvania's House of Representatives. This is the second time Joanna has made history. The first occurred in 2018, when she became the first woman and first African American to be elected chairwoman of the House Democratic Caucus. Joanna is a lifelong resident of Philadelphia and a graduate of Grace Temple Christian Academy. Joanna became active in her community and went on to earn her degree in political science from La Salle University. She continued her postgraduate education by earning a Juris Doctorate from Villanova University School of Law. While there, she interned at the Regional Housing Legal Services as well as the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. As a lawyer, she became Chief Assistant Public Defender for Philadelphia. In 2013, she became Chief Counsel to Pennsylvania Senator Anthony Hardy Williams, where she was integrally involved in policy development and legislation. Among her many distinctions, she was named to Philadelphia's and Pennsylvania's top 40 under 40 list, the Barristers Association of Philadelphia Outstanding Young Lawyer of the Year Award, Fun Time Magazine Women of Influence Award, and the Black Gala Women of Excellence Award. Joanna was first elected to the House of Representatives in 2015. She entered leadership in 2018, as mentioned, by being elected as the Democratic Caucus Chairwoman, and in November 2020 was elected Democratic House Leader. We look forward to talking to Joanna today to discuss her top agenda items and her view of being able to work with the Republican Senate to help pass Governor-elect Josh Shapiro's budget and initiatives.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Joanna, welcome to the Volpe Report.
So glad to be here today. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I am very thrilled and honored because it's once in a while I get to speak to somebody who made history on this show. It's happened in the past. I think Stacey Garrity, our Republican state treasurer, was the first woman to win a statewide office of that nature. She was on this show as a guest. In Scranton, our mayor, Paige Gephardt-Cognetti, in this media market, of course, was the first woman in the history of Scranton. And now I'm speaking to the next Speaker of the House of Representatives of Pennsylvania, the first woman to hold that position. So the first thing out of my mouth is congratulations on this historic achievement.
Well, thank you. I truly appreciate it. And thanks to all of Pennsylvania's voters that participated in our last election.
Yeah, we have had record turnouts the last in 2020 and 2022. I have, as we talked off air, I had to correct some of my friends who also assumed you were the first African American. They knew you were the first woman, but as you and I talked off the air, I have personal knowledge. That honor, actually, we have to go back almost 50 years. K. Leroy Irvis, who served in the legislature with my father. That's how I know who he was. And as I told you off air, in my office behind me at my desk in my chair sitting behind me, I had, obviously the picture I have up there is because my father was in it. But it's a whole panoramic view. They still take those of the House. They take a picture at the start of a session. You'll have one with you up as the Speaker coming up soon. So let's talk first. I consider this a housekeeping matter, Joanna. We have somewhat of an unusual outlier situation. In a normal world, you would just go in, you'd be elected Speaker in early January when you get sworn in. This year, when that happens in early January, because 3 seats that are Democratic seats, they actually will not be there because 2 of them have gone on to Congress. including Summer Lee, of course, is one I know because I have a lot of friends and I have a residence in Pittsburgh. And then one gentleman, I think Representative is it DeLuca, passed away,
Yes.
which means those 3 seats are empty. So technically the Republicans still have the majority when you get sworn in. Now, Brian Cutler, who's been on the show a number of times, the former Speaker of the House, has already said he is not going to seek the speakership, which would apparently clear the path for you to be the Speaker. Is that kind of what's going to happen?
So it's unclear what is going to happen when we resume January the 3rd for our swearing in. I have been in touch with now Leader Cutler, and I have heard through the grapevine that the Republicans will have a candidate. And I know every time, even when my caucus has been in the minority for the last 12 years, we offer a candidate for speakership. So it's not clear yet. So I'll just tell everybody watching to stay tuned. Make sure you have PCN on Tuesday, January the 3rd. It will be an exciting moment. And we do hope and are working very hard to be able to gather enough votes so that on January 3rd, after 246 years, the oldest legislative body in our nation will finally have a woman speaker. And I hope to truly have that honor.
You've earned it. And my audience, as you're aware, they heard about your wonderful resume and your credentials, your public service even before your election to the House of Representatives, your ascension through the various caucuses, caucus chair and other things, to ultimately become the minority leader of the House. And I am very optimistic and hopeful. One of the things I think that's starting to be a realization, Joanna, this is my personal opinion now, I have no authority for this, maybe it's more I should say I hope, is that there's going to be more collegiality, there's going to be more bipartisanship. I have been, as I've told you, very critical on this show for 8 years. We're 10 years of this show. So 8 years, though, looking back, of Governor Tom Wolf's governorship, I've been very critical of him for not getting things done. You know, I've been, very frankly, I've criticized him for like a 4th grader taking his ball and go home. You just can't say, well, I'm done dealing with these knuckleheads, and that's it, because Pennsylvania citizens suffer when things don't move forward. And I'm hopeful that after what's gone on, enough intelligent, responsible people like yourself, for example, like Brian Cutler and others are saying, we need to get things done for people. They're hurting right now. With inflation, the economy, crime is an issue. You're from Philadelphia. You know what crime is. God knows better than I can talk about it. There are things that need to be addressed, and the partisanship and meanness of politics, I think they send a message to Republicans that we were inclined to vote for you on the economy and other things, but you put up extremist candidates, and we're tired of the war and internal fighting. So I hope the Republican Party does the right thing. You're a deserving person. You've paid your dues, not only politically, but you have the educational, intellectual ability to lead this state as the Speaker. I hope they do the right thing. I wish I had.
Well, I hope so too. I hope so too, Chuck. I'm going to make sure I play this tape, maybe send it in an email with a holiday greeting.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah. I'll be getting calls from my Republican friends. They're like, what are you doing? Telling the truth, and it's about time we start electing and nominating people who've earned the right to be there. Before we get into some of your policy issues, what do you want to get done when you become the Speaker of the House of Representatives? What's your wish list as far as getting stuff done that you hopefully will get, because you're going to need help from the Republican Senate to get anything done. The governor-elect, Josh Shapiro, has clearly extended an olive branch to his Republican colleagues and understands to get stuff done, we need everybody. So what's your plan?
Well, first of all, I'd like to give a congratulatory remark to Senator Kim Ward. Hopefully she'll be on the show very soon. She is the first woman to be the President Pro Tem of the Senate. Right. And President Pro Tem Kim and I, we have a great relationship. We worked very closely during the redistricting process. She was the first woman to be a Senate leader in her chamber. And I was, of course, the first woman to be a woman leader in the House. So we have a great relationship. We are going to be working through the chambers across the aisle. You know, we're on the House side, and for those who've been to Harrisburg, you just take a few steps the other direction and you're on the Senate side. And we recognize we have a mandate. Voters give us a mandate with each election. Sometimes they say, we don't like what you did, so you're out of here. And other times they say, we like what you're working on, continue to expand that. And people are in pain. People are in financial pain. People are living in areas that have high crime, and that is something we have to address together. So I look forward to us being able to to build an agenda with our new governor, and most importantly, being able to tell the folks at the end of the year, here's what we accomplished together. We know we never agree on everything, but you're right. If we can get in the middle of that football field, we can meet people's needs, and that's what I'm all about.
Yeah, well, on this show, for example, and I mentioned to you that I met Democratic Congressman Matt Cartwright, a very close personal friend, as well as the Munley family, his wonderful wife, Marion. But we were talking on Thanksgiving Day, ironically, by a chance meeting, and he's been on this show a lot, and he actually had the most number of Democratic bills that were co-sponsored by Republicans of any Democratic congressman in the United States Congress. So I already know he's going to be able to work with, now he has to work with, in the minority, in the Republican United States Congress. But again, I see a movement from both sides, Joanna, to get away from the extremism and we're all Americans. We're all citizens of this country and this Commonwealth, and our country is a little sick right now. And I'm optimistic about its future. It's the greatest country in the world and has been and will be, and it's in good hands and good stewardship, but it's ailing right now, and Pennsylvania specifically is ailing right now, and it's in part because of the hyper-partisanship. Both sides use the power of the majority to punish the other side instead of working together. You have now that gavel, and you have that power to now reach across the aisle and get things done. And hopefully your relationship with the next majority leader in the Senate, Kim Ward, who I know well as a friend, by the way, and then you have a governor who's going to do the same thing. I'm very optimistic about your term for the next 2 years, and the Commonwealth is in good hands, I believe. I know you care about crime. I know you care about education, public education, some of the unfairness in funding. Pick from your list of priorities as Speaker what you're going to get done going into 2023.
So we want to think about our workers. We know that right where you live, there are so many different manufacturing companies. We want to make sure that all of our workers are protected, that our Pennsylvania, our Commonwealth, is a place where businesses grow. We did do some good work across the aisle in this current session, and we want to build from that progress. We work together across the aisle to lower the corporate net income tax, and we want to have a business-friendly environment. We want to make sure that our workers are able to join unions and work in safe environments. We want to make sure there's more access to health care so that Pennsylvanians are able to make decisions about their health care with their doctors and not bringing the whole General Assembly along. And we also want to make sure that there's violence prevention. There are strategies that have worked in many other places. In my city where I live, and I love Philadelphia, and so many other places, it's not only Philly. Unfortunately, we've been overwhelmed lately with gun violence. So we want to have prevention strategies to improve public safeties. And we know so much for our young people starts at school. Their self-worth, their ideas for themselves, their hope for the future. So we want to ensure that your zip code here in PA, no matter what your zip code is, you'll have a great public school near where you live that provides you with the opportunity you need to better yourself and get ahead in life.
Some of our poorest neighborhoods and poorest school districts don't get the appropriate funding in the way the formula works right now. So will there be some effort to try to change that and right that wrong, I guess, the unfairness of how the funds get distributed? They're not getting done fairly.
Yes, absolutely. It's a priority, and it has been one in our caucus for a long time. And our governor-elect, Josh Shapiro, shares that goal, because when you invest in children, you prevent them going in the pipeline to prison. You're able to give them the start that they need so that there's literacy. When I was a public defender, you mentioned this in the introduction, the number of people I represented who also could not read, who had not completed school. I mean, there are keys and signs. It's no longer a mystery. We know what happens when our children are not invested in, when they don't get the worth, when they don't have the teachers who are paid appropriately to have the resources to put in front of them. They are not set up for success. And we wonder, well, why are people making these types of decisions? Or why are folks even falling away under some sort of conspiracy theories? And we've got to start with investing in our children. You mentioned Scranton, and my good friend that used to be in the House, Senator Marty Flynn, has been a champion for that school district to make sure sure that the funding gets fixed. But we have to look at the formula, because you are right, Chuck. Until we look at how every single one of those public dollars goes into the formula, we're going to still have the haves and the have-nots. And that's just not fair for our children.
Right.
They only get one opportunity to go to grade school.
Right, there's no doubt. Well, Joanna, believe it or not, we blew through the first half of the show. We have a lot more to talk about, so we're going to take a quick break. I have a view that I've told you about that will air now, and as soon as that view is done, we'll come right back, so stay tuned. Heading into November 8th, the realistic chances of a legitimate Trump presidential campaign in 2024 were still real. Republicans were poised for a red tsunami across America. But a funny thing happened on the way to the blowout. The toxicity of Trump-backed extremist candidates proved to be a dam no wave could overcome. The sad part is, he doesn't care. Remember, his penchant for self-destructive behavior derailed his presidency. He doesn't know what would have been in his own self-interest to support Republican candidates who were actually qualified for the offices they sought and could win. Instead, Trump supported extremist candidates whose primary qualification was blind loyalty to him. Apparently, Trump didn't understand that hitching his star to the side that got slaughtered was not the right political capital. It didn't have to be that way. Right here in Pennsylvania is a prime example. Had Trump endorsed his loyal friend, former Congressman Lou Barletta, who finished second in the 12-person Republican primary for governor field, he would have probably won. Remember, Barletta was among Trump's earliest supporters in 2016 for the presidency and co-chaired Trump's re-election campaign in 2020 in Pennsylvania. However, Barletta's sins were he didn't support Trump's lies, didn't participate in the January 6th insurrection, and was not an election denier. So instead, Trump endorsed Senator Doug Mastriano, who had the only qualification that Trump cared about, a willingness to support Trump's lies. Mastriano was an election denier, a QAnon supporter, a participant in the January 6th riot, with a political philosophy to the right of Attila the Hun. In other words, unelectable. It gets worse, because Mastriano got obliterated. So the Democrats not only won the governor's office, but also picked up several congressional seats in Pennsylvania, winning razor-thin victories that would almost assuredly have gone Republican had the governor's race been competitive. Then there was the U.S. Senate race. Dr. Oz, a terrible candidate who didn't even live in the state, who barely beat Dave McCormick in the Republican primary, due no doubt to Trump's last-second endorsement of Oz. Apparently, McCormick's prior support of Trump and the fact that his wife Dina was Trump's deputy national security advisor didn't account for much, because McCormick wasn't an election denier. That is just a sampling of the harm Trump did in Pennsylvania. That harm was repeated against responsible Republicans all across America. Apparently, Trump is trying to do addition by subtraction. Maybe that explains why he still thinks he won the 2020 election. We're back, Joanna. Okay, as we talked about, you have a number of things on your agenda. We've talked about a bunch of them right now. We hit schools, obviously, is going to be a top issue for you. Some criminal justice reform, I know. Talk about your experiences in that. We've talked kind of about crime. People care about that. You had a great front row seat. You were an assistant chief public defender. You interned in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. So you've been both the prosecutor on the prosecutor side and you've been on the public defender side. Crime being such a huge issue, not just in Philly, all across Pennsylvania. How do we tackle this problem, and what are your ideas?
So in terms of investing in crime or preventing crime, we have to look at what is working and what is not working. And how do we bring the respect back to even our members of law enforcement? We have seen throughout the pandemic some very tough times. I was watching a national report just last night on how many police officers are walking away from the job. And we recognize that police do not prevent all crime. You know, they respond to crime. They're our first responders. When we're running away, they run to the danger. But we also know that in our investigative units and departments, they have to have the technology to be able to resolve the issues. One of the things that we're sadly seeing here in Philadelphia is a lot of the shootings are not resolved, meaning people are never held accountable. And so if they're going to put one person in harm, What's to stop them from doing it again and again? So we're trying to get some chemistry lab enhancements so that they can be able to get DNA off of shell casings, off of bullets, because folks have to be stopped. We need law and order in our society. We need to feel safe no matter where you live, rural, urban, suburban. We shouldn't be, constantly looking over our back, but we're having to deal with that right now. And we also have to recognize that in the justice system, the free lawyers that represent you from a public defender system, they have to have enough lawyers so that they can adequately advise people so that they can move forward in their life and their cases. And for many, that may mean spending a big amount of time out of society. I'll quote a judge who I used to be in front of in family court, Judge Abram Frank Reynolds. He'd say, some people have shown us they can't live out here with us because they haven't made the right decisions and they've put all of us in our safety in danger.
Well, great answer. I've on this show made reference to former mayor of Philadelphia. I've quoted him at length, in fact, dealing with the gun violence. There were a record number of murders in Philadelphia last year. And Mayor Nutter he wasn't a guest, but I was referring to some of his quotes about the issues that there's somewhat, it appears to me, to be somewhat of a disconnect between, and I'd like you to speak to this, because he spoke for a lot of people that aren't particularly happy with District Attorney Larry Krasner, who, of course, was recently impeached, not on your watch. This was done last term. I'm not going to even bother you with that because it's going to the Senate for the trial now, so it's really not an issue that you will face. But, there seems to be somewhat of a disconnect. Of course, District Attorney Krasner will argue that he got almost 70% or so of the vote and was reelected, and the people spoke. But, you have an African-American and formerly beloved mayor of Philadelphia saying what you're doing isn't good enough, and we're losing black and brown lives, and our neighborhoods need to be cleaned up. So your discussion on crime and some of the issues, you confront that as a citizen or a resident of Philadelphia. You're one of their citizens. So you're in a position now to obviously do something about it. You're uniquely qualified, Joanna. Obviously, I said you have prosecutorial experience. You're a chief assistant district or public defender. You've defended indigent people, and which now let me segue into another issue you're going to have to deal with. The governor has declared an opioid epidemic in Pennsylvania. Fentanyl is a scourge that we face. So what would you say will be on your agenda dealing with the opioid crisis? I know we face it nationally, but it seems to be particularly pronounced in Pennsylvania. So talk a little bit about the drug addiction problem we have and what you see, because as a public defender, I don't have to tell you, former assistant public defender, drugs are the underlying cause of a lot of crime that, to pay for the addiction, obviously, results in robberies and thefts. So talk a little bit about that real quickly. That's one of the most important things we face in Pennsylvania.
So one of the things we've been sadly seeing is overdose deaths. We've seen it in children, we've seen it in teenagers, we've seen it in adults of all ages. So many people trying to use drugs, not knowing that they have fentanyl and seeing the deadly outcomes. And it has not slowed down. We have to get to a point here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that there are resources readily available. There's support, there's treatment, there's detox centers, there's methadone maintenance programs, whatever it is that our studies and research are saying will help stop the tide. We've got to stop the tide. I know that a lot of doctors have gotten tighter with issuing opioids for pain now. I know you can't just buy certain things in the pharmacy now. Some of them are now locked. So the same way the response has been on that side, we as the government, we have to provide the support, because the number of people that I represented who said, Ms. McClinton, I don't know what happened. I was high. That is unfortunate. That's an unfortunate reality. People, like you said, Chuck, they're doing drugs, finding an escape, and then just wanting to get more drugs to get to the next high. And you have to wonder, with the way these murders are happening as well, how many of these folks are also doing drugs or on some sort of escape and or have some emotional challenges that have never been met. We've seen footage where people just, in the middle of traffic, get into a fight and pull out a gun. That is not normal. We should not be normalizing it. It should not be something that happens every day. And we need every level of government to respond. I've often said when the pandemic started, we started hearing from everybody, from the White House, the governor's mansion, our our mayors, everybody was giving us briefings. All of the different departments were working together. We have to address both gun violence and drugs on that same intense level. Each department needs to be at its capacity. So if that's the DA's office, if that's the police department, everybody needs to be beyond capacity. We are at the point now where we have lost so many to either opioids or gun deaths, or just those who've been victimized that have been able to live. We got to take it very seriously. Like there's a real war happening on U.S. soil, because sadly it is.
It is. Well, again, well stated. You now again have the power of that gavel and the speakership to push that agenda. I've got to believe that your Republican colleagues care about the issue too, as strongly as you feel and others feel about it. How do we really help, Joanna, working families in Pennsylvania? What can be done? You know, obviously, you know, health care is important. We talked about that off camera to a degree, but there's a lot of issues they face. You know, issues like, for example, there's an epidemic we haven't talked about of depression, especially among our young people. I read a statistic probably about a year ago on this show. We had a doctor on the show, and I had some statistics that some staggering number, like, believe it or not, 1 in 4 teenagers in this poll, and it was a Muhlenberg poll, I think it was a legitimate poll, 1 in 4 teenagers during the pandemic had contemplated suicide. And it was prevalent, especially among girls, teenage girls especially. They were much more so than teenage boys. But as we still are coming out of the pandemic, working families are suffering. We have a drug issue, and we have a crime issue. And, you know, how do we get out of this malaise that people are in relative to kids who are kept away from schools? We have a lot to attack. So again, you have that power now to do something about it. But emphasize mostly the working families are more hardly hit than elite families whose children go to private or prep schools. They don't have those issues as much as working families have. So talk about that. I know you care about that a lot.
Absolutely. So anybody who's, going to the grocery store or getting their gas to get to work, they are feeling the pinch right now. There's some pain in the pocketbook and the checkbook, and it has been for some time. So we have to get, in my perspective, a real working group to see what can we do as a state to be able to slow down these rising costs and to give taxpayers a break and the support that they need. Is it something we need to do for our farmers so that the costs are not so high, for our eggs, for our milk? You know, those of us raising families, we need these basics and these essentials every time we go to the store. You can't say, oh, well, we'll skip it for this month. You're going to need it for your children. You got to give them the cereal. They're going to say, Mom, where's the milk? So we have to figure that out. And while we don't have all the answers today, I am fully committed to sitting down with colleagues on both sides of the aisles to say, here is a legislative package on what we can do in Harrisburg to make sure our farmers have preferred preference so that they're getting their stuff to our big dealers. But I'm not going to name all the stores that compete here in Pennsylvania, but so that they're getting it to us at a way that is competitive, that they can pay their employees, but we also on the other end are able to afford it.
Sure. Well, I know that our governor-elect Josh Shapiro will be presenting his program. Whatever hope he has of getting it done is going to start with you. And then you as a united front, the executive branch, the House of Representatives, can then deal with, as you said, your working relationship with Kim Ward will mean a lot, the Republican majority leader. But I know Josh has a number of these issues that he's addressing as well. You will be a valuable ally to him, and he's not going to get much done without the help of Joanna McClinton. I will be, if not the first, to officially say, Madam Speaker, it was a pleasure having you on this show.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it.
Godspeed in your new leadership role, and have a wonderful holiday, you and your family.
Take care, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thank you.